Now, we had a chance to meet this young man, and boy, that's just a straight shooter with upper management written all over him. Ooh.
You might think you already know everything about Office Space, the cult classic comedy that turned workplace misery into pure cinematic gold. But what if there were secrets hidden behind the TPS reports and the famous red stapler? And what if the movie you've watched for years isn't quite what you thought it was? Get ready, because these weird, surprising facts might just change the way you see Office Space forever. Number 15. The boring job that inspired a cult classic. Before Mike Judge became the mind behind Office Space, he had a job that would make most people want to scream. As an engineer, he wasn't building rockets or designing cutting-edge tech. No, he spent weeks alphabetizing purchase orders. 8 hours a day? 2 or 3 weeks straight? Sounds boring? That's an understatement. Mike has called it god-awful, and it's easy to see why. Every time he tried to let his mind wander, even for a second, he would lose his spot in the alphabet. Try imagining daydreaming while carefully ordering stacks of paper from A to Z. It's torture. Talking to a coworker? Forget it. One misplaced conversation, and the painstaking order of things collapses. That mind-numbing experience, however, became a goldmine for creativity. Mike realized that the sheer frustration, the absurdity of being trapped in a job that offers no satisfaction, could fuel humor. It's no surprise that the soul-sucking office scenes, the endless printer jams, and the pointless meetings in Office Space feel so real. They're drawn directly from his own life. It wasn't just about making fun of a boring office. It was about capturing the way people feel stuck, overworked, and underappreciated in jobs that sap their energy and creativity every day. Those long, monotonous days taught Mike something crucial. Comedy often comes from truth, especially the truth about frustration and absurdity that so many of us silently endure. Looking at the positive side, a job most would consider a nightmare became the secret ingredient for one of the most relatable office comedies ever. Number 14. Mike Judge's hilarious on-set antics you didn't see coming. When Mike steps onto a set, you never quite know what's about to happen, but genuine laughter is guaranteed. The creator behind Beavis and Butthead and King of the Hill is no stranger to bringing animated characters to life with his voice. And sometimes, he just can't resist letting those characters sneak into real life. On one particular set, a few crew members had one request. They wanted him to do his famous impersonations. And Mike? He happily obliged. He immediately slipped into the voices of Butthead and Boomhauer, causing everyone around to burst into laughter. It wasn't just a casual impression either. Mike had fully embraced the characters, making the crew feel like they were hearing them live, right there in the room. It's moments like these that show why Mike's creations feel so alive. His characters aren't just cartoons on a screen. They have a personality, a rhythm, and a sense of humor that seems to jump straight into the real world whenever he wants. Whether it's the crude, clueless energy of Butthead or Boomhauer's rapid-fire, almost indecipherable drawl, Mike knows how to capture the essence of his characters perfectly. Even off the screen, Mike's playful side is impossible to ignore. Those who've worked with him talk about the way he can lighten a tense or long day simply by slipping into one of his famous voices. It's not just funny, it's a reminder of the creativity and fun that fuels his work. For fans, it's a little glimpse behind the curtain. The man who created some of the most iconic voices in adult animation is just as entertaining in person as his creations are on screen. And for the crew lucky enough to witness it, hearing Butthead or Boomhauer in real life is a memory that lasts far longer than a typical workday. Number 13. How Mike Judge's Milton shorts became Office Space. Before Office Space hit theaters, its world began with tiny hilarious bursts on TV. Mike created a series of animated shorts called Milton, and they introduced fans to the quirky, bumbling office worker Milton Wadams, and even an early version of the infamous Lumbergh. Mike wrote the shots, animated them, and voiced the characters himself. The first episode appeared on MTV's Liquid Television in the early 90s, alongside other shorts like The Honky Problem and Huh? Milton was so memorable that the character made a few more appearances during a season of Saturday Night Live, bringing his awkward charm and tiny frustrations to a wider audience. These little sketches laid the groundwork for the later full-length Office Space movie. The dry humor, the oddball office dynamics, and Milton's painfully relatable struggles all started in these short, funny animations. Fans of the movie can trace the origins of its iconic moments back to these early TV shorts, showing just how Mike's unique vision evolved from tiny sketches into a cult classic. Number 12. From tiny sketches to a comedy legend. It all started with a small, funny idea. A quiet, awkward office worker named Milton, who always seemed to stumble into the weirdest situations. These were just short sketches, little glimpses of office life that made people laugh. No one imagined they could turn into a full-length movie. But 20th Century Fox saw something special. After the success of a big hit comedy, they wanted another laugh-out-loud film that people would remember. They were searching for something broad, silly, and unforgettable. The Milton sketches, with their mix of awkwardness and subtle humor, seemed like the perfect place to start. Even the creator, Mike Judge, wasn't sure. Could a few small jokes about a quiet guy really fill an entire movie? Would audiences care about him for more than a few minutes? The idea seemed risky. Still, the studio believed in it. They imagined a film full of the messy, frustrating, and absurd moments that make office life both familiar and funny. Gradually, Mike began to see the potential. He started thinking bigger, imagining how the tiny, clever moments from the shorts could become part of a story about ordinary office workers losing control. What if the printer breaks down? What if the boss is unbearable? What if a stapler goes missing? Little by little, the project came together, blending Mike's sharp eye for everyday frustrations with outrageous, over-the-top comedy. The result was a movie that captured the annoyances and ridiculousness of the modern office like nothing else. It gave audiences characters they could relate to, and moments so ridiculous they couldn't help but quote them. A tiny, oddball idea had grown into a comedy classic that still makes people laugh and connects with anyone who's ever worked in a cubicle. Sometimes all it takes is a spark of creativity, a studio willing to take a chance, and the right timing. That's how a few short sketches about a bumbling office worker became one of the most beloved comedies ever. Number 11. Michael Bolton finally embraces the joke. Michael Bolton didn't always find it funny when people made jokes at his expense. At one point, he was called a no-talent-ass clown, and the nickname stuck. Back in the early 2000s, Bolton admitted he was frustrated. A movie had made the joke famous, and suddenly, he couldn't go anywhere without hearing it. In an interview, he said he was doing just fine before the movie, but after it came out, his life changed in unexpected ways. The constant reminders could have worn anyone down, and for a while, it seemed like he couldn't escape the shadow of the joke. But time and perspective worked their magic. About 10 years later, Michael began to see the humor in it all. He started joking about the nickname himself and even embraced it as part of pop culture. Fans who approach him for autographs often ask him to sign Office Space DVDs, and he does it willingly, smiling as he plays along. Number 10. The real story behind TPS reports. TPS reports, one of the most famous running jokes in Office Space, aren't just meaningless paperwork. They actually stand for something. At a 10th anniversary screening of the film, Mike Judge revealed that Peter Gibbons' endless stack of TPS reports came from his own experiences as an engineer. TPS actually stood for Test Program Set Reports, a type of tedious form Mike had to fill out during his early career. In those days, Mike spent hours organizing and alphabetizing purchase orders, completing repetitive tasks that left no room for daydreaming or conversation. One small mistake could throw off the whole system, making every task feel mind-numbingly precise and exhausting. These experiences inspired Mike to capture the absurdity of office life in his film. The TPS report joke perfectly symbolizes the soul-crushing boredom and bureaucracy that office workers face every day. By turning a real-life annoyance into comedy gold, Mike created one of the most memorable running gags in modern film. Even decades later, fans still quote TPS reports as shorthand for pointless corporate work. What started as a mundane part of an engineer's day became a cultural touchstone, showing that the smallest details from real life can make the funniest, most relatable moments on screen. Number 9. Office Space and its literary echo. It might surprise some, but Office Space has been compared to a classic 19th century short story. Herman Melville's Bartleby, the Scrivener. A Story of Wall Street, published in 1853, tells the story of a scrivener who spends his days hand-copying legal documents. At first, Bartleby works diligently, but eventually he begins replying to every request from his boss with the same quiet refusal, "I would prefer not to." Over time, he stops working entirely, refuses to leave his desk, and even declines food. Movie critics have noted the uncanny similarity between Bartleby's passive resistance and Peter Gibbons' rebellion in Office Space. Both characters exist in worlds dominated by repetitive tasks, meaningless paperwork, and controlling bosses. And both find subtle or not-so-subtle ways to reject the soul-crushing expectations of their workplaces. In Melville's story, Bartleby's defiance highlights the dehumanizing effects of bureaucracy and the monotony of office life, themes that Mike Judge brought to life on the big screen decades later. The humor in Office Space comes from exaggerating this monotony to absurd levels, but the heart of the story is the same. People trapped in work that crushes creativity and individuality. By drawing on these universal themes, Office Space transforms everyday office frustration into comedy, while also echoing a literary tradition spanning more than 150 years. It's a rare example of how classic literature can feel surprisingly relevant in modern corporate life. Number 8. When accountants started quoting Office Space. During production, Mike was worried that no one would actually connect with Office Space. The studio executives he dealt with seemed completely out of touch with the dull, soul-crushing office jobs the movie was portraying. He had doubts that audiences would relate to Peter, Milton, and the TPS report-filled lives of typical office workers. But then, something unexpected happened. While the movie was still in post-production, Mike began hearing whispers from an unexpected source: the accountants. They were the first people outside the production team to start quoting lines from the movie. From discussions about printer frustrations to the infamous "I could set the building on fire" rants, they laughed and referenced scenes that captured the absurdity of office life. This reaction gave Mike a new sense of hope. If the accountants, people who actually lived the monotonous paper-pushing workdays depicted on screen, were already connecting with the humor, the film could resonate with a broader audience after all. Their enthusiasm proved that the satire was hitting the right mark. For Mike, this was the turning point. The nervous anticipation he felt throughout filming began to fade, replaced by cautious optimism. Number 7. Office Space and the End of Flair. One of the most memorable parts of Office Space was the flair. Jennifer Aniston's character Joanna worked at Tchotchke's, a stand-in for TGI Fridays, where employees were expected to decorate their uniforms with buttons, pins, and other flair. The more flair you wore, the better your performance was considered. Joanna's frustration with constantly adding more buttons became a running gag in the movie, perfectly capturing the absurdity of pointless workplace rules. The impact of that gag went beyond the screen. By 2005, TGI Fridays had noticeably phased out the mandatory flair from its employees' uniforms. Nearly a decade after the film's release, Mike Judge revealed that one of his assistant directors casually asked a Fridays worker, without mentioning the movie, why the flair had disappeared. The employee's response was simple: "We removed it because of that movie, Office Space." Mike's satirical take on workplace absurdities didn't just resonate with office workers, it influenced real-life corporate practices. What had started as a small joke about pointless uniform decoration became a cultural reference point, showing how art can mirror life and sometimes change it. Number 6. The lawsuit over Office Space's flair. The world of Office Space flair became a real-life legal headache for one of its actors. Todd Duffy, who played Brian, the enthusiastic flair-loving tchotchkes waiter, found himself in court over how the film's memorabilia used his likeness. When a special edition DVD called The Office Space Box of Flair was released, it included a 32-page booklet titled The Office Space Guide to Flair and 15 collectible buttons, the minimum amount of flair a tchotchke server was supposed to wear. Duffy noticed that his face appeared on both the book cover and one of the buttons. Feeling he deserved compensation for the use of his image, he filed a lawsuit claiming false endorsement. However, the courts dismissed Duffy's claim. The ruling essentially concluded that his appearance in the movie didn't entitle him to additional pay for merchandise featuring his likeness, especially since the items were directly tied to the film and his character. Despite the lawsuit's dismissal, the incident showed just how iconic the idea of flair had become. From a simple workplace uniform gag to collectible memorabilia, the concept left a lasting mark on fans and pop culture. It also underscored how Office Space, while a comedy, had ripple effects far beyond the movie, influencing real restaurants, merchandise, and even legal arguments over fictional characters and their images. Number 5. The red stapler that changed everything. Milton's little red stapler became a pop culture phenomenon. In Office Space, the character Milton treasured his bright red swing-line stapler, which stood out on screen because a prop designer had painted it specifically for the film. That simple touch would spark a surprising real-world frenzy. After the movie came out, swing-line customers began calling and emailing the company, asking where they could buy the Milton stapler. The product didn't exist, but that didn't stop creative fans. People started making and selling red staplers online, including on eBay, and the items quickly became collector's pieces. The demand only grew as Office Space gained a cult following, with the red stapler symbolizing office frustration and fan devotion alike. Finally, 3 years after the film's release, Swingline responded to the public outcry. In 2002, the company introduced the Rio Red stapler to its official lineup, allowing fans to buy a piece of movie history without hunting for it in secondary markets. Stephen Root, who played Milton, never imagined his simple office accessory would spark such a craze. Yet the red stapler remains one of the most memorable props in cinematic history. A perfect example of how a small detail in a film can ripple far beyond the screen. Today, the stapler is iconic not only to fans of Office Space, but also to anyone who's ever felt overlooked or underappreciated at work. Number 4. The movie that made people quit their jobs. Office Space didn't just make people laugh, it also made them rethink their lives. Many fans have told director Mike Judge and Ron Livingston, who played the beleaguered office worker Peter Gibbons, that the film inspired them to quit their jobs. These weren't impulsive decisions. They were people who had long been stuck in soul-draining positions, feeling trapped in cubicles, drowning in TPS reports, or constantly frustrated by pointless corporate rules. The movie's appeal lies in its honesty. It captures the absurdities of office life, the pointless meetings, the overbearing bosses, and the endless bureaucracy, and presents them with sharp humor. Audiences recognize themselves in Peter, Milton, Joanna, and the rest of the Initech staff. Seeing these characters rebel, even in small ways, permitted viewers to question their own work situations. Some people left quietly, handing in their resignation letters the next day. Others took bolder steps, deciding to pursue long-forgotten passions or start entirely new careers. Mike himself has said he never expected a comedy about office monotony to have such a real-world impact. Over the years, Office Space has developed a cult, following not just for its jokes, but for its power to validate dissatisfaction with corporate life. Number 3. Mike Judge wishes he could rewrite Office Space's ending. Even though Office Space has become a cult classic, Mike admitted that he isn't completely satisfied with the film's ending. The director realized too late, after the final test screening, that the third act didn't quite capture the movie's spirit. By then, the film was already locked, and reshooting major scenes would have been nearly impossible. Mike felt the story's resolution should have reflected the same rebellious anti-corporate energy that made the rest of the movie so relatable. While audiences cheered when Peter finally stood up to his bosses, shut down the printers, and reclaimed some sense of personal freedom, Mike believed there was more he could have done to fully satisfy the emotional payoff. He wanted the ending to feel less tidy, more in line with the chaotic, absurd universe of office life he had meticulously built. Interestingly, this dissatisfaction hasn't hurt the film's reputation. Fans still embrace Office Space for its humor, relatable characters, and satirical depiction of the 9-to-5 grind. The ending, though imperfect in Mike's eyes, has become iconic, inspiring countless references in pop culture and real-life office rebellions. Number 2. Lawrence's look was all about the Allman Brothers. Diedrich Bader, who played Lawrence, the nosy neighbor in Office Space, knew exactly how his character should look long before filming began. Bader wanted Lawrence to feel authentic, not just a generic side character, and he envisioned him as someone with a deep love for classic rock, as specifically the Allman Brothers Band. From his clothing to his hairstyle and general demeanor, Bader shaped Lawrence to give off the vibe of a true music lover. The kind of guy who could spend hours listening to vinyl records and debating guitar solos. His appearance was meant to contrast with the sterile corporate world that Peter Gibbons and his co-workers inhabited, adding a grounded, slightly eccentric touch to the story. Lawrence's design also emphasized his role as Peter's neighbor and occasional commentator, someone outside the office bubble who could still weigh in on life's absurdities. That mix of casual cool and musical devotion made the character instantly memorable. Even small details, like his laid-back clothing and slightly unkempt hair, were deliberate choices to communicate that Lawrence lived by his own rhythm and wasn't constrained by office politics or fashion rules. For Bader, nailing this look was essential to making Lawrence feel real and relatable, a little slice of the outside world that reminded viewers that life goes on beyond the fluorescent-lit, soul-draining offices of Initech. The result was a character both funny and authentic, with the Allman Brothers spirit woven into every scene. Number 1. Before Office Space became a cult. It all started when Fox president Peter Chernin noticed one of Mike's other shorts. Initially, Mike was told that the film didn't need big stars, just the right actors. He organized a table read with David Herman and Stephen Root, veterans from King of the Hill. The character of Michael Bolton, a gangster rap-loving programmer, was written specifically for Herman, while other roles were open. Mike had planned to play Milton himself, but Root nailed the character's signature mumble and secured the role. Wearing contact lenses because of his thick glasses, Root had to rehearse every movement carefully because his depth perception was limited. Fox, however, quickly pushed back against Mike's casting choices. They initially wanted Matt Damon as Peter Gibbons, though Mike hesitated, believing the role shouldn't carry star power. Meanwhile, casting director Nancy Klopper auditioned Ron Livingston, who perfectly captured Mike's distinctive style. Mike agreed, but the studio insisted on a screen test and even asked Livingston to lose weight in a few days. Livingston complied lightly, mostly with jump rope. Once filming began, Fox continued to voice concerns, telling Mike Peter should smile more, misunderstanding that his misery was central to the character. Mike held firm, keeping Livingston in the lead. For the supporting cast, he recruited experienced character actors and comedians, but the studio wanted an A-lister somewhere. Jennifer Aniston agreed to play Peter's girlfriend, Joanna, likely expecting to star opposite Damon. Her involvement made Mike nervous, worried about harming her career, but she fit seamlessly into the ensemble, rounding out the cast of what would become a cult workplace comedy. The crucial role of Bill Lumbergh went to Gary Cole, who wasn't exactly known for comedy back then, aside from the Brady Bunch movies. Cole based Lumbergh entirely on the animated version, capturing the voice perfectly. While not based on a single person, Lumbergh drew inspiration from fast food managers Mike had encountered as a teenager, whose passive-aggressive instructions like, "Why don't you go ahead and change the fryers, okay?" left a lasting impression. Mike despised that style of management, which made Lumbergh so easy to hate. Another memorable character, Lawrence, Peter's beer-drinking neighbor, came from someone Mike knew in engineering, a content auto mechanic who made more money than Mike, yet seemed perfectly happy. Mike auditioned Owen Wilson and Vince Vaughn for the role of Lawrence, but ultimately chose Diedrich Bader. Mike also played Stan, Joanna's over-the-top manager at Chotsky's, donning a wig and fake mustache so well that most of the crew didn't recognize him. Scenes highlighting Joanna's flair were added later to give Jennifer Aniston more to do. Principal photography began in Austin, Texas, in May 1998. Mike preferred Texas for its anonymity, despite suggestions to set the film in New York. Filming took place in a real office building converted into a cubicle-filled purgatory. A brutal May heat wave made the second day's copier beatdown scene feel especially authentic, echoing Mike's own history of office copier frustrations during the Beavis and Butthead movie. Smoke from distant fires often blanketed the skies, delaying exterior shots, such as the opening traffic jam. Even after completion, Fox was unsure how to market the film, struggling to capture its unique humor in a 30-second commercial. Mike disliked the studio's poster and trailer cuts. Studio head Tom Rothman objected to the use of rap music, but Mike insisted it added humor by defying expectations. A small focus group agreed to keep the music. Office Space premiered on February 19, 1999, opening in 8th place and earning only $11 million domestically. Mike feared he had ruined everyone's careers, but the movie found a second life on cable and home video, especially Comedy Central, where it reached new fans. Celebrities like Jim Carrey, Chris Rock, Madonna, and Dave Grohl praised it, and Gary Cole found strangers quoting Lumbergh everywhere. The film eventually became one of Fox's top-selling DVDs, spawning quotable lines, memes, and even the iconic red swing line staplers. For those who stuck around until the end, here's a bonus: the tensions that nearly derailed Office Space in ways fans would never have imagined. Let's dive in and see how. The controversial soundtrack. Beyond swingline staplers, TPS reports, and endlessly quotable dialogue, one scene in particular defined the film's lasting appeal: the printer destruction scene. Watching Peter, Michael, and Samir take their perpetually malfunctioning office printer into a field and absolutely obliterate it with a baseball bat is unforgettable. The scene's raw humor comes from its absurd exaggeration, but the choice of music amplifies its energy. The Ghetto Boys' Still, a relentless 90s gangsta rap anthem. For Mike, pairing the furious office workers with Still was a stroke of comedic genius. The song's raw, aggressive lyrics and heavy beats elevated the office meltdown into something hilariously over the top, almost like a parody of a mob hit. But not everyone agreed. Tom Rothman, an executive at 20th Century Fox, repeatedly pushed for the track's removal. According to Mike, Rothman's main concern was that the film needed to feel fun, implying that the harshness of gangsta rap might alienate audiences. Mike, however, believed the song was integral to the scene's humor and tone, and he fought to keep it. To settle the matter, Mike agreed to a particularly tough test screening. The session was hosted by a moderator determined to shift the focus group's attention, repeatedly questioning viewers about rap music and trying to guide them toward criticism. Yet the audience refused to be manipulated. One participant notably defended the music, explaining that the contrast between nerdy white office workers and the intense, aggressive rap was exactly what made the scene so brilliant. The studio executives were forced to accept the result. The gangsta rap stayed. Even before the test screening, Fox had shown a tendency to impose its own musical preferences. Trailers, for instance, leaned toward pop and funk tracks, including a mock suggestion of Chumbawamba's tub thumping, which would have given the film an entirely different tone. Mike's insistence on keeping gangsta rap was a deliberate creative choice. At the time, rap music, especially gangsta rap, was still controversial and often criticized in the media and by politicians. Public figures like C. Dolores Tucker had famously denounced it as degrading and harmful. Incorporating the Ghetto Boys into a mainstream comedy risked pushback, but Mike's vision ultimately highlighted how context could turn violent, aggressive music into comedic gold. The decision to keep the song paid off. Today, the printer scene is one of Office Space's most iconic moments, widely memed and referenced in popular culture. Its combination of workplace frustration, exaggerated violence, and the perfect musical backdrop turned a simple act of office rebellion into cinematic legend. Mike Judge's battle with the studio not only preserved the scene, but also subtly pushed back against the prevailing criticism of rap music at the time, showing that hip-hop could be playful, ironic, and culturally relevant, even in a suburban office setting. If you could add one more strange or forgotten detail to this list, what would you include? Which of these behind-the-scenes facts surprised you the most? And did it change the way you see the movie? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.